Shouldn't be over here, private.
Today looks like being the hottest day of the year here in the UK this summer. It's forecast to be 32 degrees. Today's ride's not going to be too long because it's one of my first after COVID and I'm taking it easy. I'm on the Ribble Assist today and we thought this would be a really good day to go over and look at a site that we've wanted to do a video on for quite some time, and that's the Battlefield East Stoke. I've done quite a bit of reading on this, but it's fairly involved. I'm not an expert. So we're actually meeting someone who is quite an expert on it, and that's the Earl of Lincoln, John de la Pole, sort of. We came out to do a recce of this site last week. We were joined by Roland. Roland is a viewer, and he contacted me to ask for a bit of advice because he suffers from COPD and he would really like to do the Way of the Roses ride, and was asking me about, you know, training for it. How does he get himself fit enough to do the 40 miles a day that he intends to do? He currently rides a folding electric bike that has a hub drive. So what Wendy's husband Terry kindly offered was for Roland to ride his Rally, which is a full e-bike with a crank drive, and I think he's getting on okay with it. In fact, he's flying ahead.
Well, Roland's bombing ahead.
He is, and he's off.
Not kidding.
We were obviously holding him up when he was behind.
We were being really nice and going at a gentle pace.
Yeah, little did we know. Hiya.
You okay?
Okay.
You got a puncture?
You've got a pump here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at those, stunning.
It's been a good year for hollyhocks, I think.
So pretty in the pink like that there.
Yep.
Oh, mind the log in the road.
Thank you. I think we'll move that. Oh, this is crazy.
This is horrid.
Yeah.
Got no chance, have you?
This is a bit concerning today because they've been cutting the hedges, and as usual all the thorns are spread across the road. We've already met one guy that's had a puncture. We helped him out. Of course he didn't have a pump with him. I'm glad they haven't cut this hedge, Wendy. I remember a couple of years back I had an absolute puncture fest along here after they'd cut the hawthorn.
Pretty red roses. Having their kitchen done up.
Now I promise you the Earl of Lincoln, John de la Pole, and he's on his bike because actually it's Paul Spence.
All right, everyone.
Paul Spence is from Lincoln, but Paul spent many years as a reenactor and he knows a lot about the Battle of Stoke Field. How long were you reenacting, Paul?
Started in 1988 and finished just before COVID, really. That was when I sort of hung up my armoured boots.
Right. So Paul, you sent me this fantastic picture of you that's very in keeping because you are dressed as the Earl of Lincoln.
As he would have been.
Yeah. How accurate is that dress?
It's very accurate. It's as good as we can get, really, apart from what the armour nowadays is made of mild steel or it's tempered, but in them days it would have been a different kind of iron, like a wrought iron. So.
Right.
But to look at it, the armour is absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly early for the 1487, but if your armour worked, you didn't. A lot of rich lords would swap their armour for fashion, and I'll get the latest fashion just coming out. But
like now,
as a battle armour, it's about spot on, really.
Right. And even the horses, even the charger.
The horse and all the accoutrements and the tack, all correct.
Right.
For the period.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So did you reenact that here?
We used to do little sort of, like what they called them, living history displays down at Stoke Hall, but never actually, you're not allowed to actually reenact the full battle on the battlefield.
Right.
It has been done once in 1987 for the,
Yeah.
the 500th anniversary.
Okay.
That's the only time they ever did it,
Right.
which
Okay.
is a shame, really.
So the spot we're standing in now, what's the significance of
Right,
this?
where we are now is roughly where the Royal Army under Henry Tudor, Henry VII, his army would have been sort of arrayed here. They should be able to see the rebel army under the Earl of Lincoln, who took the high ground north. I don't know how far it is from here, 1/4 of a mile maybe, roughly. So they would have all been lined up here getting ready to actually advance forward into contact with the enemy.
Right. And who were the Yorkist army comprised of?
On the Yorkist army, we've got the Earl of Lincoln. He's got a lot of foreign mercenaries on his side. There's Irish mercenaries who've come over with Thomas Fitzgerald. He was their commander. They consist mostly of lightly armoured, what we call kerns, very, very lightly armoured, fast mobile troops who can probably just charge into battle as quickly as possible. They also had more heavily armoured Irish troops who were called gallowglass. But even then, they were just wearing basically chainmail shirts and helmets and that. They weren't wearing a lot of plate armour at all.
Right.
They'd all carry small round shields. But his ace up his sleeve was he had a contingent of German and Swiss mercenaries under the command of Martin Schwartz. And they were battle-hardened troops from Europe who'd fought in many, many battles and won. And they would have been armed maybe like pike blocks or halberds, but they are reputed to have quite a few early handgunners as well, which is basically a light cannon that you set off with a burning linstock.
I didn't realise that they had firearms that early.
Yeah, guns. They thought that guns were a much later thing, but they're finding now that a lot of medieval battlefields, they're finding gunshot and cannonballs. The Battle of Bosworth, which is 2 years before this, when they've actually found the original site now, and it's come up with loads of cannonballs. The Battle of Towton up in Yorkshire, they found a part of an exploded handgun there, a bit of barrel that had obviously blown up. They weren't brilliantly made, so they were probably more danger to the user than to the enemy.
So how many people were involved in this, soldiers?
Right, approximately, there was about 8,000 foot soldiers on the rebel Yorkist side, and the royalist side, the Lancastrians, they estimate around maybe up to 15,000 soldiers.
Wow.
But they only committed, the Lancastrians only committed their vanguard, which was controlled by the Earl of Oxford. So it was only really his troops that fought in the battle. All the others waited at the back,
just in case,
in reserve, because he was a capable, well-seasoned soldier. The Earl of Oxford basically took command of the battlefield at Bosworth 2 years earlier, and his troops basically held the ground and won it. So he was a well-seasoned veteran who knew what he was doing.
Part of the Yorkist army was a controversial character by the name of Lambert Simnel.
He was just a young boy who the Earl of Lincoln had crowned King Edward V in Ireland. They said he was the son of George, Duke of Clarence, who was Richard III's eldest brother, who was famously drowned in a bottle of Malmsley wine in the Tower of London. Yeah. So they said that was his son who had more right to the throne than Henry Tudor. So they've spirited him out of nowhere, crowned him King of England in Ireland, and then come over here to try and get him on the throne.
But of course we have this controversial now documentary by Philippa Langley. And Philippa Langley's the researcher that found Richard III's body buried under a car park. And she made a documentary with Robert Rinder where she is suggesting that Lambert Simnel was actually a pseudonym for what was one of the princes in the Tower.
So she's saying that maybe he was one of Edward IV's sons who were allegedly killed by Richard III at the Tower of London, the princes in the Tower.
Yeah,
So
and
there's a lot of intrigue here. And
there is, and there's a lot of controversy over it,
oh, yeah.
obviously, with the various historians disputing it. But my view is, you know, they all disputed Philippa when she said that Richard III was in a car park in Leicester.
They mocked her about it, really.
Yeah, and she proved them wrong.
Proved them wrong.
I think there's something in it.
Makes sense, because the Earl of Lincoln was Richard III's cousin, so he had a claim to the throne as well. So if he didn't put himself forward as I should be the rightful king, but this boy should instead of me, so then maybe he knew that he was Edward the Fourth's son. So that would make a lot of sense then, rather than being George, Duke of Clarence's son.
And the suggestion is that he was living with a dowager aunt in Germany, and that would sort of fit, I guess, with Martin Schwartz.
Yeah, and
bringing
then
his
that's it. And then
troops.
you've got the German mercenaries coming over, willing to fight for the cause.
Yeah.
So this makes more sense that it could have been one of the princes in the Tower.
Yeah. I'll put a link to Philippa Langley's documentary below, and I would urge you to watch it because it's really, really interesting. Now, maybe it's just because we know the history of this place, but it does have a very strange feel about it.
Really creepy.
And it's not being helped this morning in that we've got a thunderstorm approaching.
Or is it the guns? The cannons?
So we're now in a spot called the Red Gutter. What's the significance of that, Paul?
Right, this is where the army is supposed to have routed, the Yorkist army. During the battle, they had lots and lots of Irish mercenaries who were very lightly, or if armoured at all. So when the Earl of Oxford's vanguard advanced, they let loose with volleys of arrows, which absolutely decimated the Irish mercenaries. This prompted the Earl of Lincoln to advance his troops down off the high ground into combat as quick as possible to avoid the arrow fire. And at this point they outnumbered the Royal Army quite significantly. But the Earl of Oxford's men were real tried and tested veterans and held the ground and managed to start pushing them back, eventually winning the day. The Earl of Lincoln was killed. Martin Schwartz, the leader of the German mercenaries, was killed. But the army retreated, came down this area here known as the Red Gutter, and you can imagine 8,000 or 7,000 or 6,000 people trying to get down somewhere like that at a run. It's going to be, people are going to be crowded, they're going to be falling over, they're going to be trampled, it's going to be mayhem. There's going to be injured people. The enemy are probably up on the high ground still shooting arrows in, just free for all really. They would, normally at the end of battles, the knights and whatever would mount up the horses and chase after them. So you can imagine they were just being cut to pieces here. The death toll must have been horrendous, absolutely horrendous. But they were aiming for the River Trent. At some point there would have been a crossing where it wouldn't have been too deep. So they were heading for that bit to get away. But this is where the real carnage happened around this area.
And of course in the day this wasn't woody, was it?
There would be no woods here, this would just been a bare hill, maybe crops on it or whatever, I don't know really.
And I think it's said that many of the injured actually were drowned in the fall.
That's it, a lot of people couldn't swim I should imagine, so crossing the River Trent in armour or heavily, a lot of the infantry would have had like what are called padded jacks and like thick padded soft armour, but still it withstand the blows, so that if that got sodden that would drag you under.
Yeah.
So
I mean it was a wide river there, wasn't it? It was shallow and wide, but if you're trying to cross that in a hurry and you're
in
injured,
a panic as well, and you've got all those, if there's a crowd of people, you're going to be pushing people out of the way, you're not going to be bothered about the bloke next to you. No. Absolutely horrendous.
So there was something like 7,000 people killed.
Approximately 7,000 dead in 3 hours of fighting.
Just 3 hours?
Roughly 3 hours of fighting. And that's how many, I mean, a lot of the casualties were from the initial volleys of arrows on the lightly armoured Irish mercenaries, but the horrendous the amount of people dead.
And they were mainly, I guess, on the Yorkist side.
There was very few casualties. I think estimated only a few hundred on the royalist side.
Wow.
Because they were all hardened troops. They were probably well equipped, well armoured. Not all in full armour, but certainly enough to protect them and to keep them safe.
Yeah.
And they weren't up against arrows, so that was a big factor as well.
Now this was in June 1487. So June, hot weather.
Could be a hot day, yeah.
7,000 bodies to dispose of. What did they do?
All they could do is they wouldn't carry them far. They would have dug pits. They don't know exactly where, but the bottom of this hill is a good spot for them to dig. You've got soft soil here because it's like the Trent floodplain, so that would have probably been a good place to dig. And they would have had to be massive pits to get that many bodies in. They would have stripped them of anything valuable and then just thrown them in and covered them all over. The bottom of this hill here is the most likely spot because of the steepness of the hill. They wouldn't have used that land for much. So that's the guess of where the grave pits would have been for the common soldiers.
Yeah, because they've never excavated
They've
it,
never
have
really done any archaeological work here at all, really. No. Very, very little, if any.
Apparently in 1982 some workmen uncovered some bodies when they were working on the side of the Fossway, and they discovered wounds consistent with the battle. Now, this church predates the battle. There's something quite interesting about it. Now, tucked behind the church, and it's obviously part of the old hall here, is this foundry. And I wondered what a foundry was doing out here, and did a bit of research and found that they actually make war games figures. Now, with 7,000 bodies appearing on one day in a hot summer, it was June, what do you do with the bodies? Now, they didn't want to bury them in the fields because that was going to cause problems when the farmers ploughed. So they dug burial pits, but also many were buried in the churchyard here. And it's actually said that the churchyard is raised up due to the number of bodies buried here. Just look at the centre of the graveyard here. Why is that mound there? It's not natural. It's no natural hill. And I would imagine that's where many of the bodies were buried. Those who weren't important enough to be buried in the churchyard are said to be buried here to the left of this lane. Oh, don't like this tall corner. It's a bit like one of those creepy American movies. I was quite intrigued, Paul, with this foundry building at the back of the church. It seemed a very odd place to see a foundry, and then I found out what it was about.
Yeah, it's not a foundry, it's called War Games Foundry.
Yeah.
It's owned by two twins, Alan and Michael Perry, who I used to reenact with years ago in a group called the White Company. They model and cast war game figures.
Okay.
Also, every period you can imagine, from I suppose Roman times upwards. I think they're about 25 millimetres high, the figures.
So they're going to be pretty accurate in their detail, I guess.
Yeah, they're absolutely some of the best ones you can get in the country.
Wow.
They're absolutely spot on.
Yeah, not the sort of place you'd imagine just tucked away here. But I guess, given the nature of this area, the battle, it's quite appropriate.
It's a lovely little area.
Well, Paul very kindly came over from Lincoln today.
And that's all right. It's been a good day out.
I've really enjoyed it, and you've really given a great narrative, something I couldn't have done in that detail.
It's all right.
So I
nice
appreciate
to share
that.
the knowledge in that.
Yeah. So you're now about to ride back to Lincoln.
I'm heading back to Lincoln. Yeah, I'll have a stop off for a coffee in Newark, and then probably go up Collingham Way, then cut through Eagle, North Scarl, up that way.
Nice ride. Good day for it.
And then Burton Hill to finish, but I'll walk up that because this bike's not geared for hills.
And you'll have a tailwind.
Hopefully,
yeah. Good. Well, thanks, Paul.
It's
really
been a pleasure,
appreciate you coming.
You and Wendy.
Look forward to seeing you again. Bye.
Bye then.
Bye. Hiding behind the main.
Along here there should be a monument to Henry VII, and it'd be a shame to miss it. That in the distance ahead of us is the sugar factory at Newark. So you can see we're fairly close to Newark here.
How far we dare go.
There's 2 deer in this crop field. 3 deer, I can see their ears.
Look at the heads up.
hiding at the moment.
Oh, wow. Oh. Do you see his ears? Oh, that's beautiful. See his ears moving. Oh, there's another one. Where have they gone? There they are. Oh, gosh.
They're probably going to come out on the lane. They've obviously seen us. Well, we've gone a long way down this track and haven't seen the monument, and we're not 100% sure where it is, so we know we can't get out at the other end, and this storm's getting quite a bit closer, so I think we're going to make tracks.
Oh dear, going to get told off by the farm now. We'll sort it out.
Hiya, we're a bit lost. We want to get back out onto the A46. Is that going to be left?
Yes, it shouldn't be up here.
Oh, shouldn't we? Oh, apologies.
If you go left here,
Yeah.
you go down to the 40. You want to be on the 46 or
The old one.
the old one?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Left
right, so we've turned left too early.
down to the bottom.
Okay, apologies for that. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. We've not been shot at by the farmer. We're still alive. Roy's just worked his magic. Quite fascinating history, really, isn't
Very.
it? I don't know how many times we've cycled through East Stoke and not known the history of it. So.
Yeah. The thunderstorm seems to have passed. We took shelter for a moment because it was starting to rain a little bit too much. But Wendy has now decided that she fancies going to the beach. Now the only problem with that is we're talking 70 miles to the nearest beach, so I'm not sure what she's got in mind.
Oh, it's warm there.
Very.
Wow. And that's from the traffic as well.
Yeah. See, they race along the A46 and then have
And
to
then
stop.
Woo.
Oh.
Great place for a lock though, isn't it, with
Isn't
the castle as well. Oh, fantastic.
Look, I was too busy watching that guy in the kayak to see what he was doing. Slammed my leg into the bollard and nearly hit it totally.
I think he was wild kayaking.
I think he was. He looked a bit wild. Very nice too.
He was probably doing the River Trent end to end or something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you that remember the tragic story of Stephanie Slater that was kept in the wheelie bin, this is the yard where it all took place. And after escaping that ordeal, sadly she died of cancer. Well, that's about it for today, because not only is it very hot, we've got some thunderstorms surrounding us, so good idea to get back. Wendy's just asked the question if we can get struck by lightning on a bike. I'm not sure, but I'm not going to test it. So thanks for joining us today, and hope you'll join us again soon. Bye for now.